Oakland's ousted mayor indicted in the middle of a federal bribery investigation.
It's a corrupt scheme in which the defendants used bribes, mail fraud, wire fraud, and other illegal practices to manipulate and corruptly influence the levers of local government.
Months after the FBI raided her home, Sheng Thao appeared in a federal courtroom, former mayor defiant, even in the face of a slate of charges.
There is, in fact, no evidence to support these charges, and we will look forward to doing that in the courtroom.
This is CBS News Bay Area with Elizabeth Cook.
And thank you for joining us. I'm Devin Fehely. The feds are calling it a case of political corruption, and the recalled Oakland Mayor Sheng Thao is at the center of it all today. The feds released details of the indictment against Thao. They say that she promised to flex her political muscle to put money in the pockets of a wealthy family if they helped her win the election. Our CBS News Bay Area crews were the only ones outside of the Oakland Federal Building this morning when Thao willingly turned herself in. The former mayor walked into her hearing facing charges of accepting bribes from the owners of a recycling company in the form of payments and political favors. The indictment alleges that the owners, David Duong and his son Andy Duong, funded a $75,000 negative campaign targeting Thao's opponents during her run for mayor. The feds say that the father-son duo also put Thao's boyfriend, Andre Jones, on their payroll for what's known as a no-show job. That's a job where you get paid, but you never show up, you never do any work. The goal that the feds say was to mask those bribery payments. This afternoon, all four of them face charges, including bribery, conspiracy, and mail fraud. We saw Jones as he was leaving the federal building this morning. And here's a look at Andy Duong at the federal courthouse today. He is also accused of making false statements to government agents. Feds say that Thao promised to make moves as mayor to benefit his family.
Examples of promises allegedly made by Thao include her agreement to purchase housing units from a company owned by the Duong family, her agreement to ensure the extension of a contract for recycling services that the city of Oakland had with one of David and Andy Duong's companies, and her agreement to use influence to help appoint a high-level city official to benefit the Duong's business interests.
Now, just before noon, Thao and her attorney walked out of the Oakland courthouse and addressed reporters.
The United States Department of Justice's Justice Manual requires the government to look carefully at its prosecutions to ensure that the actions that they take are not actions that are taken to affect the outcomes of elections. And the timing of the investigative steps by the government in this case, including the unsealing of the indictment today, has called all of that into question. The mayor looks forward to defending herself against these charges, showing that there is, in fact, no evidence to support these charges, and we will look forward to doing that in the courtroom.
All of this stems from a multi-year investigation by the FBI. Last June, FBI agents raided the Oakland home of then-Mayor Thao and Andre Jones, her boyfriend. They could be seen carrying out boxes of evidence to their cars. Now, this came 2 days after Alameda County Registrar of Voters announced that there were enough signatures on a petition to recall Thao from office and to move forward with that process. The FBI also raided properties connected to the Duong family and their recycling company, California Waste Solutions. The Duongs hold a lucrative recycling contract with the city of Oakland, and they have a pretty interesting backstory. The family escaped from Vietnam and eventually went on to open the first recycling warehouse in West Oakland. California Waste Solutions is now worth hundreds of millions of dollars and employs hundreds of people. Over the years, Andy Duong has become a regular face in local and state and national politics. He helped organize a trip to Vietnam in 2023 that included local delegates, including then-Mayor Sheng Thao. He is now charged with making false statements to government agents. His lawyers released a statement saying in part, quote, "Our client and friend Andy Duong is innocent of these charges. We have kept quiet despite the media frenzy of the past months in the hopes that the government would correctly come to see through objective investigation that the allegations are baseless and being fanned by nothing more than gossip and supposition," end quote. David Duong's attorneys also maintained their client's innocence, saying, quote, "He looks forward to prevailing in this case and continuing his decades of service, philanthropy, and devotion to our community and the Bay Area." Here's a look at the timeline. Thao was elected mayor of Oakland in November of 2022, becoming the first Hmong American to lead a major American city. She faced criticism for firing a police chief, Laurent Armstrong, and for the city's struggles with public safety, homelessness, and the budget. In June of last year, 2024, as we mentioned, the FBI raided her home that she shares with boyfriend Andre Jones. This past November, Thao was recalled by Oakland voters, and today the FBI handed down its indictment on federal corruption charges. Joining me now is CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, I am interested at the timing of this. Do you think that she would have still been indicted on the same timeline had that recall ultimately failed?
So I have a sense that the indictment was really based on a separate timing, in the sense of the indictment was based on the investigation, on when they gathered evidence, on when they thought they had enough evidence to go to a grand jury and say, here are the charges we want to indict on. And it should be, I know this sounds strange, but it should be a different calculation, in the sense that whether or not to bring charges and when to bring charges should be unrelated to the election cycle. I know that's strange to say.
You know, as you read some of the allegations that the federal agents and the U.S. Attorney's Office is making, it's saying that a lot of the direct payments went to Sheng Thao's, live-in boyfriend, but they made pains to say, well, she used to pay half the rent, and then he paid all the rent. Are they trying to basically sort of form a nexus to bolster their argument that she benefited from these payments in addition to him?
Really smart question, and exactly right, because I think we've already heard out of court a little bit, which is her defense of not me, not it, I didn't know, don't try and connect me to any alleged wrongdoing. And what you see in the indictment is the prosecutors here trying to do the opposite. You knew exactly what you were doing. This was a concerted scheme. There was fraud, there was mail fraud, there was honest services fraud, and you benefited. And that's why I think you're exactly right to point out that fact that she used to pay, alleged fact that she used to pay half of the rent, then started paying none of it. The idea is that you don't need to directly get a payment into your bank account in order to directly benefit from an alleged bribe.
If I understand sort of the alleged conspiracy and what the end game was allegedly for the Duongs, they were looking at recycling contracts, they were looking at, housing contracts with the city. To my understanding, that did not come to fruition. Did it need to? Did they actually need to get the things that perhaps they were angling for the feds to prove their case?
Another great question. And the answer is no, you don't need to, in the sense that what you need to show is an abuse of office. So it can be attempting to make those things happen. What you need to show is that you use the position in order to try and make good on the alleged bribe. But there are all sorts of reasons we know why government officials can't necessarily make things happen. For instance, it's still bribery if you pay your member of Congress to try and take a certain action. Ultimately, they tried, they weren't successful. If they made the attempt, if they took the money and then made the official act, that's enough.
Now, what I can imagine her defense is going to be, and you kind of signaled this before, is, okay, these things may have been happening in my orbit, but I wasn't aware. How closely do the feds have to tie her to all of this in order to get a conviction for her part of it?
Yeah, also really important. And the answer is it depends on the charges. So for those charges where there's a direct charge of bribery or fraud, for instance, then you need to tie the person really closely. When you're talking about conspiracy, then you need to prove that there was an agreement to commit illegal activity and that there was an overt act taken in order to effectuate that agreement. But in terms of how closely they need to tie her to these actions, I mean, the answer is pretty closely here. They're going to need to come forward with the evidence that we see in the indictment in order to get a conviction in this case. Now, we should also note that it's also the case that sometimes you see certain charges are added or subtracted as a case moves forward. So I'm not saying this is going to happen, but you can see a situation where one co-defendant is later charged just with conspiracy.
We don't have much time. I have one last question for you, and maybe it's a relatively simple answer. What do we think is a reasonable timeline for all of this to be adjudicated in the courts?
Oh my gosh, not a simple answer for a lawyer. Lawyers can complicate everything, right? That's our job. So a reasonable timeline, I will say, what I know is the time from complaint to a potential trial can be years. And what we're going to see is everything from they're going to try and have the case tossed out, which I do not think will happen, to they will try and have evidence tossed out. All of this is going to take months, not weeks. And let's remember that most cases don't go to trial.
All right, Jessica, thank you so much for your time today, for your insight, and for your analysis. Thank you so much. All right, so after today's announcement, several local officials and organizers spoke out condemning the former mayor after losing to Sheng Thao in 2022. Candidate for mayor and city councilman Lauren Taylor, he talked about the alleged conspiracy that may have cost him an election.
It's about Oakland voters. Their choice, their ability to have real representation was stolen. And we have to restore the system. We have to restore faith and trust in the system. And we have to start working for Oaklanders.
Organizers with Sheng Thao's recall effort also spoke out, but took a victory lap by saying thank you to their supporters.
Because now we know that we have saved Oakland a great deal of time, energy, and heartache. Imagine this happened today and she was still our mayor.
This all comes as Oakland prepares to elect a brand new mayor. There are currently 16 candidates, including Lauren Taylor and former East Bay Congresswoman Barbara Lee. We're going to continue to follow this case and the latest developments on air, online, and streaming on the free CBS News app.
Thanks for watching. You can always get all the latest headlines and weather over on KPIX Plus. And remember to like and click the button on the bottom left of your screen to subscribe for the biggest Bay Area news.